What is being decided about the Hormuz Strait will have a revolutionary effect on all global freedom of navigation. Why? Well, because what is unfolding between the United States and Iran could reshape how we think about the seas as a global commons and how vulnerable shipping routes are to new forms of control and monetization. Until now, freedom of navigation has relied on a strong informal guarantee. Great powers accepted that key straits remained open, partly because they all depended on them. The new arrangement coming up in Hormuz Strait is about to chip away that guarantee and turn free transit into a negotiable, billable service. The core of the problem lies in the recent Memorandum of Understanding between the US and Iran. Iran clearly emerges from this crisis as a relative winner, having obtained recognition of a transit fee through Hormuz, formally presented as a contribution to infrastructure and security. Article 5 of the memorandum does two things. First, it restores previous traffic levels within 60 days with special routes because of mines. Second, it grants Iran and Oman the right to set shipping lanes and adopt international regulations in accordance with international law and the sovereignty rights of coastal states. Legally, this leans on Article 42 of the United Nations Convention on the Laws of the Sea, known as UNCLOS. This article allows coastal states to adopt regulatory measures for safety and navigation, environmental protection, and fisheries. Politically, however, it turns a technical clause into a powerful tool. You can restrict, redirect, or change for transit under the umbrella of regulation without openly violating the convention. What was once a clear principle, free transit passage through straits used for international navigation, becomes a precedent. If it is accepted in Hormuz, others will copy. This precedent does not exist in a vacuum. It connects with a broader, quiet understanding among the United States, Russia, and China, whose influence is visible in key parts of the memorandum. We are moving from an era where free trade and open seas were the default into an era where national sovereignty over maritime checkpoints is increasingly asserted. Freedom of navigation is no longer only a legal principle, but a bargaining chip in great power politics and regional crisis. If major powers accept that a strategic strait like Hormuz can be regulated and monetized in this way, it legitimizes similar claims elsewhere. Bit by bit, the oceans risk becoming a patchwork of controlled corridors, each with its own political conditions and price tag. The first ripple is already visible at Bab el Mandeb, the southern gateway of the Red Sea. Houthi attacks from Yemen have reduced traffic. Adding Hormuz-style fees for security would compound costs on a route where ships already pay for the Suez Canal. The cumulative effect is simple but profound. Shipping companies will increasingly send vessels around Africa, instead bypassing the Red Sea and Suez. This rerouting would weaken Mediterranean ports and reinforce northern European ports with Atlantic access. A similar logic can emerge on the Northern Sea route, where Russia and China plan major port investments. Transit there could depend on payments for services of general economic interest under Russian control, an Arctic echo of the Hormuz model. In the South China Sea, coastal states are pushing to extend jurisdiction over exclusive economic zones, explicitly citing security concerns. If the Hormuz precedent is normalized, these claims gain additional legal and political weight. Across all these cases, the same pattern appears. Security is used as a justification to regulate, restrict, and change for movement along sea lanes that used to be treated as global commons. Finally, regulatory measures under Article 42 of UNCLOS are not allowed to determine freedom of navigation. They must serve safety and protection of shared goods. Substantively, however, the way they are now being interpreted can hollow out the right to transit passage without ever declaring it abolished. If more states follow the Hormuz model, freedom of navigation risks a slow erosion. Not through dramatic acts of closure, but through incremental regulation, fees, and security conditions that make certain routes politically fragile and economically unattractive. This erosion would have three global consequences. First, higher costs and greater uncertainty for global trade. Second, more leverage for coastal states and great powers at checkpoints. Third, a geography of maritime routes increasingly shaped by politics, not by efficiency. In such a world, shipping plans and supply chains would have to factor in not only fuel prices and transit times, but also regulatory risks and potential sudden changes in security fees at critical straits. This is not a narrow technical debate. It is about whether the seas remain a global common governed by clear rules or gradually turn into a network of toll roads controlled by a few coastal and great powers. For Europe, and particularly for the Mediterranean and also Adriatic countries, defending freedom of navigation is not just about current trade flows. It is about preserving the very architecture of global maritime order against a slow, legalistic renationalization of the seas once and for all of the main freedom the British and the American century gave us: navigation.